Can't we all just admit that Williams is a completely and utterly broken mess right now, and how that is a good thing? Yeah, try telling that to the court of public opinion, who are practically calling for James Vowles' head on a spike. It's not been a great start for Williams this year, hasn't it? Granted, they're not exactly the worst team out there, because when their car does get out on the track, it's not right at the back anymore. We all know who is presently, I needn't say any more, but you can't deny that recently, in terms of public relations, Williams has been through the ringers, haven't they? It seems like all the goodwill that James Vowles has manifested since he took over as team principal back in February last year has completely and utterly evaporated. Well, I mean, it really doesn't help that all the maladies that Williams have been suffering in the background have completely come to a head in the past 2 Grand Prix. But let's be fair here, Alpine don't have a spare chassis either. And no one's really calling for Bruno Famin's head. Well, I mean, if anybody actually cares about Bruno Famin right now. And also, it probably doesn't help that Williams has 2 drivers who are really active on social media, or at least have a social media presence, be it in terms of just nice, wholesome content about their pets and just generally being a nice guy, or the fact that he's American and has memes about him. Come on, I'm just saying what's true. Couple that with a car with limited spare parts, no spare chassis at all, compromised upgrade paths, and you get yourself something that resembles an utter embarrassment. And this would be bad enough if this were just a run-of-the-mill team like your Saubers or your Hasses, but this is Williams we are talking about here. One of the most storied teams in F1 history. But having said that though, many would argue that Williams' story practically ended at the end of the 2004 season, the last year where you could truly say they were really competitive and right up there at the front of the F1 grid. Albeit with a little epilogue from circa 2012, you know the one. And if you think that the title of this video is complete and utter clickbait, that I'm just trying to get this to get more clicks, no! James Vowles himself has said that he needs to break the team, that the team right now is in a broken state, but can be repaired. So take your anger out on James, not me. But mind you, he seems to be getting a lot of anger already, so I guess add some more then? Speaking with The Athletic, Vowles commented that the changes were going to be mighty if they were going to mean anything other than just window dressing or the false dawn of the mid-2010s, when the turbo hybrid era arrived and anyone powered by Mercedes were practically guaranteed a decent result. And with Williams being unencumbered with trivial things such as downforce and grip in the corners, and straight line speed was one of the only things that mattered, Williams could be competitive. Massa could get a podium, and they could get somewhere close to 3rd place in the constructors. At the time, you could easily say, yes, Williams are back! They are now competitive and kicking F1 butt! That lasted long, didn't it? As well as the false dawn of 2021, when they got 8th place in the constructors and everyone thought, yes, Williams are no longer the last place team. That was even shorter of a false dawn, with 2022 the ground effect era proving to be utterly cataclysmic for Williams, as we all know. Clearly, when Vowles took over, he observed all of that going down and just went, yeah, I can see what they were doing here. Right. If my tenure as Williams' boss is going to mean anything, then I've got to make drastic changes. Okay, what he actually said was this. Ahem. It was always going to break part of the organization. I knew that, but if we don't start to do leaps, I don't mean small 1% changes, I mean leaps forward, we're not going to be where we want to be. There's not enough hours in the day to do everything that you need to do from a commercial perspective, from a driver perspective, from a technical perspective, from the perspective of transformation and rebuilding the team, and a technology one. Otherwise, you get caught up in the hamster wheel when you're just doing it the whole time. It's just not something I can fix overnight, or we can fix overnight. So you see what I mean? Vowles said the word break here. But in all seriousness, Williams are not acting the way they should, but they can't act the way they used to. For starters, Frank Williams isn't around anymore, nor is Claire Williams. No semblance of the Williams family is currently operating with the team. As for Claire Williams, she's only just re-emerging into the public eye in terms of the F1 space, having spent years eschewing all of that. I was quite surprised when she was in Drive to Survive. She was a really nice addition. And that episode when they were talking about outside investment with Alpine and Ryan Reynolds, you could really sense the venom in her voice. I'm pretty sure that the memories of Doralton Capital and her ousting are very fresh in her mind. But hey, at least Doralton respect the team's heritage and have kept the name and have really embraced the culture of Williams to some extent. At least they're not, Drake F1 team who only keep the name Sauber basically because they have to, because they have a brand name which is completely and utterly problematic and it's banned in some countries that F1 takes part in. Yeah, nice going, guys. And what Vowles is recognizing is that Williams is effectively operating in a time bubble. On the calendars around Grove, it didn't progress past 2004 effectively. And of course that was when Juan Pablo Montoya had issues with Frank Williams and co, and then he jumped to McLaren, where he had the exact same thing happen all over again, this time with Ron Dennis. And thusly, JPM wasn't in F1 anymore. This was another case of the Frank Williams and Patrick Head combo pushing out yet another important cog of the operation, which caused Williams to fall apart subsequently. And that wasn't the first time that happened. It happened multiple times throughout their history. You had it with Adrian Newey, you had it with Nigel Mansell, you had it with Damon Hill, you had it with BMW. So many important members of the team that kept Williams running competitively just walked out because Williams and Head would just go behind their backs. I mean, Jenson Button's another example too. He got pushed out for Montoya, even though Button was pretty decent. Yeah. It happens. Nico Hulkenberg, yesterday's video, need I say more? Sure, Williams comes with a lot of heritage and they are an important part of Formula One. And literally, they come with a lot of heritage. They get a heritage bonus from Formula One because they've been around for so long. But you also got to remember that the heritage of Williams also comes with a lot of discord, drama, and disagreement. It's not exactly the most rosy team out there. So you can understand why James Vowles looks back at that and sees the bad side of Williams' heritage and history, and looks to break that apart and transform it into something completely and utterly new, whilst also respecting the past, just not wanting to repeat it. I don't think you need me to remind you of all of the stuff they've unearthed over the winter, the really bad and really silly stuff that he and Pat Fry, his new technical director, unearthed. You know, the archaic equipment, their really amateurish way of cataloguing parts. Please don't tell my wife I said that, she loves Microsoft Excel. As well as multiple cliques and oddities that were not befitting for a team that was trying to survive in the era of ground effect and cost caps. And in a way, what Vowles is seeing is pretty much what happened over at Honda when they took over from BAR. A team with idiosyncrasies, really weird ways of going about things, and just a really weird contradictory situation with their performance, and yet they're a works team. You think the situation with Alpine is bad, you could easily argue that in 2007, Honda's lot was even worse. Vowles' old boss Ross Brawn took note of that for 2008 and basically told the team that that year was going to be a complete and utter write-off, to fully focus on 2009 and the upcoming regulation changes in hopes of better results. I mean, come on, we all know what happened after that. Let's just say that Brawn's plan worked. It did lay the groundwork for Brawn GP to evolve into Mercedes GP, and then into Mercedes AMG, and then Toto Wolff would take over the reins, and he would then perpetuate that success going forward. But let's acknowledge, my friend, that the true reason why Mercedes was successful, it came from the hands of Ross Brawn and Michael Schumacher, to some extent. They laid down the groundwork, Toto just kept it warm. Vowles, now freed from the Mercedes Temple of Misery that was formed in recent years, senses an opportunity to emulate what Brawn did with Honda over at Williams, only with a little more time to do so, as well as financial backing from Doralton, which doesn't show signs of disappearing anytime soon. Remember, Honda has a habit of flaking out of Formula One when it senses the slightest bit of trouble, only to then completely regret it, and then come back to F1 with open arms, so long as the regulations deem it acceptable. And in the case of Red Bull for 2021, they jumped the gun way too soon, they got themselves a title, and then they realized they were leaving, and then they decided to unleave, because the Honda badge is still on the Red Bull car, even though it's an power unit. Yeah, all I'm saying, Aston Martin, is that you better have a plan B. Unless you get Aramco to buy Honda for you, in which case, yeah, it's all good. Ross Brawn 2.0 now has 2 seasons to do what version 1.0 could only do in 1 effectively. And then of course had one hand tied behind his back because progress in 2009 in terms of upgrades for the Brawn car were minimal. They were able to build a third chassis, they had a front wing upgrade, and that was it. The car that they ran for that whole season was pretty much the Australian spec, bar a front wing. Yeah. That makes it all the more impressive. Williams are in better health financially speaking, but considering what's gone down for them in the last 4 races, you wouldn't be thinking that, since they've been really struggling for spare parts, as well as having no spare chassis, and then their drivers keep crashing. I'm sorry if that sounds a bit glib, but, you know, they did crash. It really doesn't help that the F1 media circus has really spun that into complete and utter overdrive, with Ted Kravitz's comments coming out, and I will admit, they did sound very unprofessional. You know, talking about, why do your drivers keep crashing? I mean, they did, but, you know, you just can't tell you why. Ask the drivers. It's unfortunate that all of this happened at once, but there is good news though. Supposedly for the Chinese Grand Prix, they now have a full allocation of spare parts again, as well as the repaired chassis, and that the third chassis will be arriving for Miami, and that also they have upgraded front wings for both drivers, so Logan isn't missing out, and Albon has a little upgrade around the halo. So they have been able to restore themselves after the trials and tribulations of Melbourne and Suzuka, but that was a close call. It could have easily been worse. But it just goes to show that Williams isn't completely and utterly broken. They're mostly broken, but they're getting there. It'll just take a while. Okay, why is Vowles breaking Williams in such a spectacular fashion so quickly? Well, it's simply because, well, he has to. 2026 is a year where the roster could easily change and a brand new order of teams could easily find itself becoming apparent. Case in point, 2009 ushered in the arrival of Red Bull as a force to be reckoned with, and had Brawn not been hindered with practically no money for innovating their already amazing car, Mercedes might have been up there with them much sooner for 2010. The same team headed the charge in 2014, as well as the 2017 and 2019 tweaks. Then Red Bull were able to reassert themselves with the rule changes in 2022. So you see how things can easily change, and that was happening up and down the grid as well. For 2009 and 2014, Williams did step up a little bit. They became that little bit more competitive. And in fact, in 2009, Williams could easily have been challenging the works team Toyota, who was supplying their engines, for the chance of 5th place in the constructors. You know, had Williams had another driver who was equally as talented as Nico Rosberg, because Rosberg was carrying that team. I'm sorry, Kazuki Nakajima and Kazuki Nakajima fans, but it's true though. Go and look at the results. Since Vowles was present for Brawn's push for 2009, he's conscious in getting much prepared for such an important change in the rules which could allow Williams to truly leap back toward the top 5 teams, instead of there being a huge gulf between that and 6th, which there is presently. Sure, if Williams got 6th place right now, it would be amazing, but there's such a huge gap between that and 5th place, sort of what we saw with Alpine and Aston Martin last year, that sure, you can be the best of the rest, but you want to try and catch up and overtake Aston Martin? Good luck with that. No matter how bad Lance Stroll is doing, you're not catching 5th place. By the way, here's more from Vowles, so you can see what I mean. I'm confident now that we do have a good amount of forward vision taking place in the background, that we have teams working, be it on aerodynamic perspective or concept development for 2026. And that's going to be very, very strong in the years to come. And what we're also trying to do is make sure our company is structured correctly, such that we can deal with almost 3 years worth of work in one, because that's what we're now asking of the organization. Trying to do all of that, wow, and not changing the utter fundamentals of Williams, that would be utterly foolish. So that's why Williams isn't doing that anymore. Vowles is making sure of that. The old way of doing things at Williams needs to be put down right now. They can't do that anymore. They got lucky last year with Albon being the best Minister of Defense since, well, the last Minister of Defense, Sergio Perez. All of the workflows that got Mercedes to where they were in the turbo hybrid era of 2014 to 2020, James Vowles was part of that. He was part of strategy. So him being there is cause for celebration and optimism. It also helps that they have a lead driver who is very well aware of the struggles that Williams are enduring right now. Can you imagine how bad it would be if Williams had a lead driver who was completely and utterly lambasting them every single weekend? Say he was on for points, then he had an issue and had to retire, and then he would constantly be dogging on the team in the press conferences afterwards. That would not only get the team down, but it would really drag the overall goodwill of Williams down even further. That they're holding back a decently good driver. Yes, so-and-so, the Williams suck. No, Albon is on the same page. And even when he was crashing in Suzuka, he realized, oh, this is not going to end well. He felt bad for the team. He's on board. He's very much well aware that they don't have spare parts, but Williams have got to keep trying anyway. They took a gamble with having no spare chassis, and Albon reckons that if they let all of that get the better of them, that they were scared of taking risks, that they may as well just go home. That's a really ballsy attitude to have, and it shows that having Albon was such a godsend that they're grateful for his presence. As grateful as Albon is for Williams giving him a chance, regardless of all of the chicanery regarding Toto and contracts and Red Bull and spying and all that stuff. Sure, Alex Albon hasn't done his reputation any favours in the past 2 races, what with his accidents, but the work he's done prior to that is something Williams is really, really thankful for. And as for second chances and whatnot, not everybody gets that, and Alex is very well aware of it. And while he is contracted to Williams, he is going to be giving more than 100%. He knows what Williams can do. He knows what Williams is working on for 2026. And yes, he is contracted until the end of 2025, but there's no real reason why he would leave when everything's really on the up and up and things are changing very, very rapidly for them. Who knows where they might be at the end of this season, let alone the next season when we get the first car fully designed by Pat Fry, their new technical director. And granted, there are rumblings going up and down the grid that Helmut Marko is trying to peg Alex Albon down for 2026 to partner Max Verstappen, or to take over as Red Bull team leader if Max Verstappen does get up and quit Formula 1, which I kind of doubt at this point. But the point is, though, is that there is a lot of speculation Alex could go back to Red Bull. But we just got to remember, he's at Williams right now, and if he did leave, then there would be a really big glaring red flag that all was not well at Williams and that James Vowles' ultimate grand master plan had failed. But as for the other driver, all the stuff that Williams is doing could be at his expense, and that being, of course, Logan Sargeant. He's been told by Vowles to prove the grid wrong, to be the surprise of the season. Well, the only surprise he has manifested thus far is how he didn't fly off the handle after having to hand over his car to Alex, only for him to crash it the following race. The limitations of the team are clearly apparent, but it's really not helping the case of the rookie of 2023 to further continue his Formula 1 adventure. He is fighting for his life for 2025, and it really doesn't help that in the 4 races thus far, he had to sit out one of them through no fault of his own, and then he was going really well in the 4th race, and then the pit stops completely scuppered him, he then had an off, he had all of these issues, he was really doing well considering, but then there were just things that got in the way. I just get the feeling more and more now that whatever Logan does, he's going to be collateral damage for Williams as they progress toward 2026. He'll just be a footnote in Williams' history, that they'll be grateful for him being a gosh darn good old sport, and that they'll just give him a nice little send-off and say, thanks for coming, maybe go and try your luck at IndyCar, mate. And it really doesn't help that Williams is already looking back to the F2 drivers in their academy. James Vowles is now wowing himself over the efforts of Zach O'Sullivan. Then there's mutterings of Kimi Antonelli again. Some reports saying that he could be flown into the Williams seat as early as the Italian Grand Prix, 5 days after he turns 18. I personally don't think that. I think he's going to be doing loads of FP1 sessions after he turns 18. First one being at the Italian Grand Prix, 5 days after he turns 18. Anyone keeping count about me making that prediction? I'm all for it. But you can't help but wonder that Toto might try and exert his might once more and try and convince, beg James Vowles to put Kimi Antonelli in that Williams for the rest of the 2024 season, meaning that potentially Kimi is being seen as so good that he doesn't even need to complete an entire F2 season because he's destined for Formula 1, which is going to add even more pressure. And if Kimi doesn't deliver, he turns out to be a damp squib, which I seriously hope not, it's going to be the utmost embarrassment for Toto. Him losing Lewis Hamilton, that'll be just a drop in the ocean. If Kimi Antonelli comes into F1 and doesn't perform, that's going to be the thing that probably spells the end of Toto Wolff being the team principal of Mercedes. He is betting the farm on this move, and if it doesn't work out, he's going to have to fall on his sword. Really, Law? Surely he'd just go straight to Mercedes and be done with it. Why bother Williams at this point? Well, that's kind of the reason why I think Mercedes has a seat nobody wants, and why Sainz should steer well clear of it. As I detail in this video, and why people should just let Kimi go into F1 and just see what happens.